is boilerplate. Some of this is boilerplate up front. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Division of Marine Fisheries public hearing tonight. As you just heard, the hearing is being recorded and will be on DMF's YouTube channel. If you would like to watch it a second time or share it with anyone, that will be posted tomorrow. One of the upsides to Zoom is that we don't have to travel out in this horrible night with the difficult travel conditions. But one of the downsides is it's difficult for the public to actually see who's in attendance. But I do want to just mention the DMF staff that are part of tonight, and also one of our commission members. In addition to myself, we have Jared Silver, we have Nicola Meserve. Nicola is the striped bass specialist and my proxy at ASMFC. Getting back to Jared, he's a policy analyst and does a lot of our regulations and compliance and policy work as well. Ben Gahagan, who runs our Sportfish program. Bradley Morgan, who does outreach and communications. And from our advisory commission, there's Eric Nelson, and of course, Story Reed as our deputy director up in Gloucester, and he oversees a lot of our permitting functions. So I have some slides, and then I'm going to turn over some of the slides to Nicola Meserve, our specialist on striped bass management. So tonight we're holding this hearing under the provisions of General Law 30A, as well as which is the administrative statutes that govern public hearings, and then the Division of Marine Fisheries statutes under Chapter 130. Sections 280 and it says here 104. It should be 100A. So we're taking public comment on a series of emergency regulations enacted to amend 3 chapters of our CMR, 607, 701, and 704, relative to permitting in the commercial striped bass fishery beginning 2026. And there are 4 aspects of our actions. The first one is creating limited access. The second one is requiring the permit to be what we call owner-operator. The third is once it's limited access, of course, then the question is, well, can I transfer the permit? We're proposing, at least at the beginning, to not allow transfers while we potentially create a different kind of program for entry and exits into the fishery. And the last one is the control date, and we'll get into what a control date is shortly. We are going to accept comment, written public comment, through 5 o'clock on Friday the 12th. So please submit them directed to me, but not to my email, because it's much easier if you use the main Marine Fish email account. I know some folks have been sending me emails directly, and I have to make sure that those get over into the larger pool of comments, so that when we share them, with the commission and with others in the agency, it's all in one place. The timeline for this rulemaking, next slide. The timeline is we enacted these rules, what we call the emergency authority, back in October. We were in discussions over the summer about some of these proposals. Normally a regulation takes like 6 to 8 months to enact. But if we feel that a regulation is needed faster, we request under the authority that is in the statute, with the commissioner's approval and of course the governor's approval, to do emergency regulations, which shortens that time frame substantially. So we enacted these in October. I'm sorry, we announced them in October. We enacted them on November 21st. Emergency regulations can only live for 90 days, and they either have to be renewed or enacted as final, which is our hope. Or if neither action take place, then they simply evaporate and they go away. So we're here now during the public comment period. On December 18th, I'm going to be presenting these comments and my recommendations for final action to the Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission. It's a 9-member citizens board that oversees our regulations governing the times, places, manners, and quantities of fish that may be taken, which is most of our rulemaking. However, when it comes to permitting, they don't get a direct vote on to either accept or reject these proposals. But as a matter of practice, I try to get consensus and as much feedback as possible from this 9-member citizens board because of the great cross-section that they represent of the general public. And then finally, we would be enacting final rules, and that means, my recommendations served up to the commissioner and the secretary and of course the governor no later than February 19th, because we need to enact something in that 90-day period in order to have the rules live on after that 90-day period expires. So again, the 4 actions that we're talking about today, one is creating this permit as a limited entry permit. So many of our permits at DMF are under limited entry, and what that simply means is we don't issue new ones. In order to get a permit, you have to renew your permit every year. If you don't have one, you'd have to get one through transfer. So this particular permit that we're talking about here regarding the lack of transferability, which is the 3rd bullet, we are proposing, at least in the early stages of this, until we can work out a program for temporarily making these non-transferable. Obviously, it's in no one's interest to have a permit that is permanently non-transferable, because once the holders leave the fishery or leave this earth, the fishery disappears. So we always need to have some kind of an influx of new participants. The 2nd bullet is requiring the named permit holder to be present when the commercial striped bass is occurring, the so-called owner-operator rule. This is a rule that we have in so many of our other fisheries, such as lobster, fish pot, whelk potting, and of course, if you're shell fishing, the permit is in your name, and you have to be the person who's present and also selling the product to the dealer. And then finally, this control date is right now on the books. There's a control date of June 14th, 2022, and we're proposing to, or what we did is through the emergency action, we moved it up to the end of this year, and the purpose of this was to accommodate the folks who might have gotten a permit over the last 2 or 3 years, so that if we do some kind of a future action where someone needed to have certain levels of landings to continue to participate in the fishery, that date of December 31st essentially is the new cutoff date. And but obviously, no landings came in from the end of the striped bass season, which I think is in the first week of August, until the end of the year. So essentially, it's the 2025 season that becomes the new control date, functionally speaking. So at this point, we have slides on each of those 4 items, and I'm going to invite Nicola Meserve to step up and talk through each of the 4 proposals or 4 actions that we're proposing to make permanent.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm going to start off with a little bit of background information that will help with the understanding of each of the 4 proposals. The first is relative to stock status for striped bass and the implications for our commercial quota. As you likely know, striped bass are currently designated as overfished, and they're subject to a 10-year rebuilding plan with a goal of rebuilding the stock by 2029. Our quota, a commercial quota, is assigned by the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, and over the last 10, 15 years, it's been reduced to about half of its peak level due to declining stock status. And it's unlikely to return to prior quota levels In the near future, given ongoing juvenile recruitment failure that is suppressing the stock's long-term ability to rebuild to those prior high levels that supported the quota that was double the amount that we have now. So the combination of the low quota and high participation levels has resulted in a short season. In the last couple of years, it's been generally 15 to 20 days long, despite restrictive limits in terms of the number of days open per week and the daily catch allowances. Um, that high participation level results due to the open access permitting nature for the striped bass endorsements. We issue around 4,500 per year. Typically, that's about 4,000 that are considered renewals, somebody that had them in the prior year and they're renewing it, whereas 500 are new. There's a lot of way to kind of characterize these permits. A couple basic facts are that only about 20 of them that we issue will report selling any striped bass in a year. So there appears to be, a significant amount of latent effort among permit holders. Additionally, most of the active permits could be characterized as minimally engaging in commercial fishing. Only about 2/3 of those that are active sell only striped bass, so they're not engaging in other commercial fisheries for black sea bass or bluefish or whatnot. Those that are active, about half of them take less than 4 trips in a year and harvest less than 15 fish in a year. Um, in addition to kind of that latent effort and activity information, we do have concern that the permit is being obtained to avoid the increasingly stringent recreational fishing regulations, and a concern that that catch is not always being properly reported. A lot of that can be characterized as personal use harvest, and unfortunately, when that harvest is reported, it doesn't get counted against the quota. So as the fishery has contracted and limits are getting more stringent, there's a concern that we're not properly accounting for that against the quota. Um, One of the new pieces of information that we're responding to with this proposal is that there is a requirement under the interstate plan, to switch to harvester tagging. Last month, the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission Striped Bass Board met, and they removed what had been, since 2014, state discretion for states to implement either harvester or dealer tagging programs. The new requirement is that by 2029, all the states have to have programs in which commercially harvested fish are tagged by the harvester prior to offloading the fish or removing the vessel from the water, or in the case of shore fishing, it would have to be immediately upon retention. So currently, we have a dealer tagging program in which we issue and account for tags to about 125 primary buyers per year. Those tags, per the interstate plan requirements, need to both be issued in a number that is somewhat associated with the quota. It doesn't have to be the exact number that's accountable to the quota, but you can't issue, 5 times the number of the quota, for example. And those tags at the end of the year have to be accounted for, and any unused tags returned to the division as part of that accountability process. And so it would be very difficult, if not impossible, for a DMF to effectively administer a harvester tagging program to the 4,500 permittees that we have as harvesters. In terms of reducing the number of permittees, the control date is one of the tools that we have. Control dates are established, and they serve as an advisory to permit holders that access to a fishery may be limited in the future, using history prior to the control date as the qualifying criteria. That could be amount of landings, number of trips taken, permits held, etc. Those types of specifics are often developed at some future period of time after the control date is established, through a future regulatory action. So this action that we're going to be talking about tonight is just establishing the control date, updating it, not looking at what those qualifying criteria would be yet. The permit applicants do sign an affidavit each year when they get the striped bass endorsement, acknowledging that they are aware of the control date and understand it. So this shouldn't be coming as a surprise that there is a striped bass control date and that it could be used in the future. And we've had a control date for striped bass for 15, 20 years. It's been updated a few times along the way to avoid becoming very outdated, where it wouldn't make sense to use that control date and very old history to qualify permits in the future. Lastly, for background, permit transfers. All of the division's permits and permit endorsements are established as non-transferable unless it's authorized by the division. Transfers of limited entry permits provide a mechanism for new entrants into the fishery. That is important. However, it's not the only approach that can be taken to allow new entrants. One thing to know about when permits are transferable, they are subject to both actively fished criteria and recipient experience criteria. There are some exceptions to those transfer rules, such as with immediate family members, the death, disability, or active military status of the permit holder, or when permits might be bundled and be transferable, and not every single one of them may have to be active. And then lastly, owner-operator status. Again, this requires the permit holder to be present during fishing activity. It's a little bit of a misnomer to call it owner-operator. It's not the owner of the vessel per se, but the permit holder that has to be present during the fishing activity. This does not, fishing activity, covers the fishing itself. It doesn't extend to the possession of the fish for sale or for transport of the fish for the purpose of sale. So, for example, a sternman could, after the vessel is landing, the sternman could take the fish to the primary buyer, while also in possession of the permit to make the sale. Owner-operator requirements have been applied to several other limited entry fisheries in Massachusetts, generally to prevent permit leasing, maintain the nature of the fishery, and also to enhance compliance and accountability. When the permit holder is on board, there's a lot more to be accountable to. There are exceptions to owner-operator status. We've gotten a couple written comments about this already, so it's good to stress that there are exceptions to owner-operator status for immediate family members, which is qualified as a spouse, child, stepchild, adopted child, sibling, step-sibling, adopted sibling, parent, step-parent, adopted parent, grandparent, or grandchild. So there's that exception for immediate family, for active military duty, and up for 2 years for a death, disability, or other good cause as determined by the director. That exception has to be granted through a letter of authorization issued by the director before somebody else could serve in the place of the permit holder. So moving on to the 4 proposals, the first of which is the basic limiting of entry. This will make the striped bass endorsements limited entry next year, so the issuance will only be through renewals of a prior year permit. In this first year, though, we are being a little bit more inclusive by saying that somebody that had a permit in either 2024 or 2025 would classify as a renewal for 2026. Moving forward, it would be having the permit in the prior and only the prior year. So we do anticipate that there will still likely be somewhere around 4,500 permits issued for 2026. Most people will probably renew them if they're are allowed to. So that really this is the first step towards further reducing permits to preserve the remaining opportunity for the existing participants with the reduced quota levels, and ultimately to enable us to adopt a harvester tagging program, which can only be done effectively with a reduced number of permittees. But all of those next steps are going to be achieved through a separate rulemaking process next year, where the control date and eligibility criteria would be developed and taken out to a public hearing in a totally separate kind of phase two of our overall approach here to getting to harvester tagging. For owner operator, that's the second part of this. Again, establishing the endorsement as owner operator. With the permit holder having to be present during fishing, someone else can deliver the fish to the buyer, though. By adopting owner-operator status for the striped bass endorsement, it'll provide for consistency across all the permits that can have a striped bass endorsement on them. Already, individual and rod and reel and coastal lobster permits, which are the base permit that a striped bass endorsement is attached to, those are already owner-operator. So this will treat those that have a boat permit plus a striped bass endorsement in the same manner with that owner-operator requirement. Again, there are those exceptions. And we believe that owner-operator will prevent the permit from being leased, particularly, before we figure out the next steps for limiting entry. It enhances accountability and compliance. It upholds permit sanctions when someone who has had their permit revoked can't, just simply have their somebody else get a permit and fish that. And then it's consistent with the small scale nature of the striped bass fishery. Regarding transferability, as we said, this is one way that you can allow for new entrants into the fishery after access has been limited. Transfers tend, however, to significantly drive up the cost of entry to a fishery. Essentially becomes a price paid for the permit that is well beyond the amount that the DMF charges for a permit. So we intend to explore some alternative approaches to allow for new access into the fishery that would maintain a lower barrier to entry. And this would be more consistent with kind of the history of the striped bass fishery being, more open access, being a small scale and important entry level fishery into the marine economy. The non-transferability would not affect what we would call a permit upgrade. An individual would still be able to move their striped bass endorsement from an individual or rod and reel permit, for example, to a boat permit. That would not be considered a transfer, but a permit upgrade. And then lastly, the control date. The emergency rule updated the control date from June 14th, 2022 to December 31st, 2025. We know we're going to need to use this control date to further reduce permit holders to achieve the harvester tagging requirement. The old control date is multiple years old, and if it were used, you could potentially restrict access from someone who's been, very highly involved and active participant for 4 to 5 years in the striped bass fishery. So that's why we are updating it to so that it could include fishing activity through the end of the 2025 commercial fishing season. Again, how that control date is applied and used to further reduce permits will be the subject of a future rulemaking process sometime next year. So at this point, we're prepared to take questions and comments on the 4 issues that are on the screen here. Again, we're inviting comments. If you need to start out with a question before you can provide your comment, a clarifying question, please do so. And I think Jared is going to be monitoring the hands. We'll ask that you raise your hand in Zoom, and Jared will call on you and unmute you so that you can ask your question and provide your comment.
Good evening, folks. So you can use the raise hand function, create a queue, and we can get to comments and questions.
Jared, can we have each speaker give their name and their, I guess, the town where they're from? So sometimes we have multiple people with the same name from different towns, so it'd be useful to just maybe clarify that. So thank you.
Sounds good. Look at 41 shy people out there tonight. All right, Ryan Cook is starting it off. Ryan, you've been recognized. You can unmute yourself.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Hi.
Hi, Ryan. We got
How
you
you
now.
doing? How you doing? All right.
Doing
So,
good, thanks.
so my question is, I own a vessel with my brother-in-law. We've owned the vessels, well over 10 years and has a boat permit. And we've only been able to have it in his name because you only can put one name in the permit. So under the new rule, I would not be able to fish alone, even though prior to that permit being issued, I had an individual permit and then a boat permit for another boat. So looking for some sort of, guidance on that.
So, because the owner operator requirement has that exception for immediate family members, which includes, let me double check,
Does not include in-laws.
does
I
not
went over
include,
this with Ryan yesterday, I
okay.
believe.
Let's
So
try
I
and
think,
see.
Ryan, your comment would then be for us to consider some type of mechanism to accommodate situations with dual ownership of a boat where the permit's been fished by both individuals.
Correct. Yes. I mean, we can document a boat title going back to 2008 in two people's names. And, just the nature of the permit, you can only put one person's name on it when you apply.
Okay. So yes, under the current rule, that you wouldn't be able to get the permit moving forward, but we'll take the comment that that is, something that you'd like for us to consider.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ryan Adams, you're recognized. You can unmute yourself.
Hello.
Good evening.
So I was just wondering, as far as like establishing with the control date and like how much catch people have on their license, how are you gonna get those numbers? Is that gonna be done from what people report? Or are you gonna go into like dealers too and to see like, slips and stuff like that? That's my main question.
Historically, when we've used criteria like that in the past, we'll primarily rely on documented sales, and we'll use that through both the safest data that the harvesters submit as well as the data that the dealers submit that we monitor the quota through. So we won't be going into dealers to look at their slips, but dealers do, report weekly reporting in striped bass that give us the information, and you guys do your monthly reporting, and we'd rely on both of those to make those decisions.
All right, thank you.
Rick Golden, you're recognized.
Hey team, just to piggyback off Ryan, what the question that he had in the clarity, thanks for that. The question I have is it's just for 2024 and 2025. Is there a quantity or the amount of pounds that were sold to the dealer that you're gonna quantify? Like, is there a that what is that threshold? What does that limit look like? I had an off year in between the sale of boats and transferred to my skiff, and I think 2024 was a down year. So if those are the only 2 years that you're taking into consideration, and there's like a floor, I just want to prepare for that.
Sure. So for 2024 and 2025, we're just looking at whether or not you held the permit. So just a simple presence
Oh, okay.
absence test. Moving forward, as Nicola described, when we do have to move towards a more limited population to implement harvester tagging, we will likely look at qualifying criteria. We haven't developed those yet. We're still analyzing the data. That will be something that goes out for, to our Marine Fisheries Commission through the public hearing process in 2026 for 2027 or after. because we have until 2029 to implement that tagging program.
Okay, and just based off of, and obviously this isn't on, well, it is on the record, but it's not something that, is going to be accurate for at that time frame, but you're going to look back like, 10 years, or you're going to look back at, 2024, like say it's in 2027, you're going to go back 3 years, or you're going to go back 10 years? Any idea?
Yeah, I don't think we have any firm plans yet, but
Okay.
if you want to put something in writing, some suggestions, we'll consider that, but we don't have any proposals yet. So
All right,
it's
thanks.
too early, yeah.
Thanks, Dan. All right, take care.
Thanks, Rick.
Yep.
Mike Paulison, good evening. You can unmute yourself. Mike, there's a little microphone button you got to hit. You there?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, Mike. How's it
Good.
going?
This Zoom stuff is frustrating, that's all. Listening to what I've been hearing so far, there seem to be concerns about fish that aren't being reported or aren't going into the quota. I was under the impression that catch reports, you had to put down everything you caught, whether you ate it, you sold it, or whatever you did with it, however you disposed of it. Why isn't that being enforced?
So
I just don't. Go ahead.
yeah, you're correct, Mike, that everyone should be reporting all commercial harvest under the permit, whether it's sold or kept for personal use. But because the personal use doesn't go to a dealer and it's the dealer reporting that we use for monitoring the quota with, there is some amount of harvest that occurs under the commercial permit that isn't counted against the quota. The reported landings for personal use are very small. They amount to about 1 to 2% of the total commercial harvest reported. But there is some concern that all the personal harvest is not being properly reported, particularly where striped bass may be taken and it's the only species taken and it's not being sold, or there may be some underreporting of that personal use harvest.
I understand that, Nicola. It's just that I figure they have to submit a report every month like everybody else, that if they were doing their job and doing it correctly, then the 1 or 2% you're talking about, at the end of the year, you'd see that and you'd know it would be included in the quota of what was taken against what was allowed.
Yeah. And Mike, I think the point there is that while 1 to 2% is reported, there is some amount of people out there who are likely not doing their jobs, and we've heard a lot of anecdotal reports to suggest that is occurring. And it's really difficult to enforce making someone report catch we don't know they're catching.
I understand that, but like I say, it seems like you should be putting more effort into that to make sure that all the fish that are landed are accounted for and into the quota.
The tagging
I don't know
program
how
we're moving towards will build that accountability.
Okay, that was my biggest concern on that. I am totally against limited entry. We've seen nothing but a nightmare in a lot of fisheries when that's been happening. Striped bass, if this is a limited entry type of thing right now. If you don't get your permit at the beginning of the year, you can't get one during the year. So if one fella decides that, hey, I want to go catch a few stripers and sell them, he can go get the endorsement if he gets it at the right time. If he doesn't care to use it, that's okay too. But I don't think the state should be limiting positively the entry. You're talking about getting new people into it. You shouldn't have to go buy a permit to get into it. It's like Nicola said, it raises the value. It causes more trouble than it's worth. Just leave the way it is. And if I want to go before the end of February or whatever it is and get a striped bass endorsement, I should be able to do so. I just think limited entry is the wrong way to manage a fishery. I can understand you people using quotas. the size of the fish, the days you can fish, all that other stuff. But for the state to decide who can go catch the fish and who cannot catch the fish, I don't think that is the purvey of the state of Massachusetts and the Division of Marine Fisheries. You know, like you say, this is a small scale fishery. You see from the number of permits on there, 20% of them used them. They caught a handful of fish. They used up the quota and it closed. What is the problem with that? Why not just leave it alone and create less work for you guys and do more to manage the fishery without interfering with the people who actually catch the fish?
Thanks, Mike.
And as it is right now, you're talking about finding money to do a tag program or something. The 4,500 permits generates $135,000 for the state of Massachusetts. And if 80% of those people aren't catching any fish, they're just giving you a freebie.
Any comments or anything else, Mike?
No, I'm good for now. I'll listen
Okay.
and maybe I might have one later.
All right. Eric McDonald, you're recognized. Eric, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, you got me?
Got you now, Eric. Go right ahead.
Okay. I agree with a lot of what Mike had to say, but that wasn't my question. My question was on the family part of it. Did that include brothers? I know she read off a list when she was
Yes.
going through it. It
Yes,
does?
siblings are part of the immediate family definition. Yes.
Okay. And then will there be something that you can put on your permit if I'm the permit holder and I'm not on the boat and my brother's running the boat? How will they distinguish? You know,
You
does he
get a
just have to
letter.
have his-
You get a letter from us
Okay.
that states who the exemptee is.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. John Scammels, you're recognized. John, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi, Jared.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I just want to say you guys are doing a great job, and I agree with the limited entry. The question I had was, I'm kind of confused on the tagging program. Is that going to be something similar to what we're doing with Tautog now?
Yes.
So the harvester, the fishermen, will be responsible to tag the stripers, and the tags will be given to the fishermen from the, like, let's say, New Bedford DMF.
Exactly. The fine details of that will be hashed out in the coming years, but
And that's
it's
going to be
similar in
alive.
process to what we're doing with Tautog at present.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, Jared, that's a
not-
couple of years out.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was just, it was a little bit, I wasn't sure of how you were going to do that and if it was the same way as you're doing it now with Tautog. Okay. That's all. Doing a great job, you guys.
Thanks, John. All right. We have anyone else? I'm seeing no hands raised. Okay. Jacob Latta, you're up. You can unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can. Yes, go ahead.
So I have a question. I run my cousin's boat and the permit's under his name, but he doesn't go out. I'm the one out there. I just put it under his name because it's his boat.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering what the situation with that would be.
Well, cousin does not fall under the current regulatory definition of immediate family.
No, yeah, I got you.
So, that I think your comment would be similar to the one at the start of this, Ryan's comment at the start of this, to accommodate historical use when the permit's in someone's else's name.
So my question would be, can I transfer that to my name?
present, no, it would
At
be issued
present,
in his name and he would have to be on board when the fishing was going on. But, that's a comment we can take, certainly.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, Jacob?
No, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Nick Petty, you're recognized. You can unmute yourself.
Hey Jared, how are you?
Doing good. Go right ahead.
So earlier you were saying the control dates have been updated multiple times. June 14th to 22 to the 2025 season. I was just wondering how long you would see that control date staying in place until it gets, pushed forward or updated again.
So, I mean, we've periodically updated the control date over the years, anticipating someday we may have to limit entry or reduce participation in this fishery. I think, based on Nicola's presentation this evening, we have to go to a point of tagging program by 2029. So I'd assume that control date would be used by then. If we need to update it in the future, then we'd update it again. But if we're gonna go to that tagging program by 2029, then that control date is going to be coupled with eligibility criteria within the next year or two to get us to a 2029 tagging program.
Great. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else have questions and comments this evening? All right, Dan, I'm going to turn it back to you since I'm not seeing any other
There's
questions or
a
comments.
slide called Next Steps, if you want to advance. So our next step is to finalize, which means enact a regulation that won't expire after this 90-day period, but make a rule that lives on until we go to a future rulemaking. Work over the spring or winter and spring to devise some proposals to further reduce the number of permits that we issue in striped bass. And this would entail coming up with certain, I guess we'll call it a filter, but or things we use as a filter, some criteria for to meet some minimum standard. In the case of tautog, and I'm glad somebody mentioned a reference to the tautog fishery, because in the tautog fishery, we required anybody who held a permit must have landed at least 120 pounds in I believe it was any year, Jared, or in a string of years, and that allowed them to continue in the fishery by renewing the permit. And those that didn't have that level of landings were not eligible. So those are the kind of things that we're probably going to be crafting as proposals, and we will do our best to propose that for 2027 and beyond. And then the tagging program has to be done by 2029. We're going to try to do it by 2028. But anybody in the tautog fishery knows it is a little bit administratively burdensome. So, it means obtaining the tags from us, numbered tags, and returning tags to us at the end of the year that are unused. And so that will be done. We expect in 2028. So again, we can expect a proposal and hearings on that during 2027.
Nicola, we have a question in the Q&A box from an anonymous attendee that asked to further explain the harvester tags, why DMF feels the commercial fishing industry would benefit from harvester tags as compared to the recreational fishery. Would you want to take a stab at answering that?
Well, it's a interstate requirement to have a harvester tagging program. Initially, when it was a requirement beginning in 2014, it was responding to some large scale law enforcement issues where fish was going to market without being reported, and so the tag has a number on it that is attributable to each harvester or dealer. They can be tracked and traced, and it just provides for more accountability in the fishery. The recreational fishery is not managed by a quota in the same way. Recreational catch doesn't have to be landed with a dealer or any other way. There is not, individual recreational reporting. So it's really not a program, that could be applied to the recreational fishery in the same way that it is in the commercial fishery.
Dan, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, I would add that we talked earlier about the challenge of people taking fish home for personal use. And in a harvester tagging scenario, those fish would have to be tagged and they would be using up one of those tags. Like if we issued a tag, a set of tags to a fisherman and they decided to eat one instead of selling that fish, that would help make that fish and fish like that accountable to the quota.
All right, I'm not seeing any other hands raised in the coat. We go Patrick Paquette. Patrick, you're up. You can unmute yourself.
Thank you, Jared. Patrick Paquette. I live in Hyannis, Massachusetts. Full disclosure, I happen to serve on the ASMFC Striped Bass Advisory Panel as the recreational seat for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I'm also the government affairs officer for the Mass Striped Bass Association. I'm not speaking on behalf of MSBA at this time. I participated in this fishery for about 12 years. I haven't in quite some time. I completely support the emergency action and it's moving along to become policy for the immediate future until the state manages for the two issues, or I'd like to say them in a different way than have been said that have come up in this hearing already. Although myself, and I know I'm not alone, would like to see a type of transferability be implemented in the future action that you guys are talking about. I see two boundaries on that that I'd like you to consider. One is I would like the state to seriously consider these permits not becoming commodity properties that are going to be something that can be sold from private individual to private individual. I do not think that is a good idea. I think there is history in that happening in the prior, and I think that goes absolutely against the entry level, the reasoning of this being an entry level fishery and introducing people to the traditional waterman or blue economy jobs that we want to protect. So hopefully the new regulation will address these not becoming something that become high dollar bought and sold by individuals and do not be something that can be bought up by larger businesses. Another piece of that transferability that I'd like to make sure or encourage you to do is not just the scenarios that were brought up in the family members that are not necessarily part of the existing LOA exemption. I think of my personal journey into this fishery years ago, and what it was I was a mate on a boat that on a charter boat that we also fished the commercial season. And eventually I ended up buying my own boat. That owner of that boat did his own thing for a while, and then I had a permit on my own boat. That boat stopped fishing eventually, years later. The ability for a mate or an employee who has been fishing, and that could be the cousin, and that could be the brother, and it could just be the 17-year-old kid who started as a crew member under the older charter captain, and then ended up wanting to do his own thing. I think there needs to be some way that when a captain decides or an owner of a vessel decides he's going to come out of the fishery, that an employee of his or a mate of his can take up that permit without having to spend 50 grand or compete in the open market. I know that you guys are really good at thinking about this stuff even more than I am, and I'm not all that bad at it, but I would hope that there would be a way for the traditional ways that people come into the blue economy is, I guess, the current way, but the way that mates become captains and enter the fishery and watermen develop through families and tradition in the small boat community. I hope that there would be some consideration, even if that, I know that lottery is another way that comes up, but the idea of it should be a priority concept of the developing regulation should be about people within the industry that are going to make the industry work, and not just be a way for people who casually, haphazardly, or use the adjective you would like, that feel like going out and catching and selling some striped bass. It should be about preserving and extending into the future the traditional striped bass commercial and small boat commercial fishery, and not necessarily be the something that people do or don't do in a very casual manner. It's a hard part-time job, but it's a life passion to do this, and there should be a way for that tradition to continue, considered within the program. And that being said, the overall suite of what you guys are doing, I do believe will have the benefits of eliminating, because there is definitely some bleed happening in the fishery. Just by the numbers that you put up in this hearing, 4,500 permits sold, 20% report. That means that there's roughly 3,600 people that are throwing away an awful lot of money to not catch fish. Sorry, common sense dictates that that's a bit outside the beyonds of reason. I do believe that I witness at times those who use the mass commercial permit as just a way to get around the private regulations and to be able to catch more fish and a larger fish than they can. And I think this is going to help. This is going to go some way in towards eliminating that and bringing more accountability to the fishery. So thank you for the ability to comment.
Thank you for your comments, Patrick. Ryan Adams, you recognize?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to add, I was just thinking Patrick kind of definitely going with what I was thinking, but I'm a younger fisherman. I'm in college, and commercial fishing, striped bass, kind of, that started for me in high school. My dad had a boat, and he never commercial fished. But there were some kids around me that were doing it, and they taught me. And, now I'm able to, I just think it'd be important with thinking about keeping young people in the fishery. And if these permits go like, fully closed, limited, you're going to have no new kids entering. And, young people really can benefit a lot from this fishery because, people that are working full-time jobs and, fishing 15, 20 days a season, no one's, making crazy money off of this fishery. So high school and college age, people that also it made me realize like I want to make money on the water for the rest of my life. So I think it would be important to kind of try to keep that in mind with some of these regulations because it's definitely a great fishery for young people.
So to Ryan and Patrick's comment, I think a good part of the reason why we immediately put a pause on the transferability of this permit and is to investigate an exit entry program that can accommodate exactly those types of ideas that can allow new young entrants into the fishery, or watermen who are kind of shifting priorities into the fishery, so that we can kind of keep the nature of this fishery moving forward, and not have it just go to the person who's willing to pay the most for the permit. So that's what we're looking to investigate. And we'll probably be proposing sometime, next year. Michael Durand, you're recognized.
Yes, how you doing?
Doing good?
I did hear Patrick's comments, and I can certainly appreciate that and want to protect the species. This is my second year with a commercial permit, and I have a full-time job. I will say one thing: I have not reported a catch or sold any fish, primarily because every day I scout, I catch them, and every day I don't. Every day is an actual commercial day. I can't catch them, and I know that sounds silly to maybe some on this call, but I will say that not everybody's out there with ill intentions, and I am trying to make my commercial catch, but I also understand the respect of the species too. So if there's that many permits that aren't doing it, then that's shameful. But just there are other considerations too, and I'm probably the minority, but just wanted to mention it.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Rick Golden.
Yeah, just something I thought of in the interim, and lots of great comments and questions coming in. And I think it was, his name was Ryan, the younger gentleman who's in college. Great point that he made. It's kind of how I got into the commercial fishery for stripers, and graduated into now running a multi-boat charter operation, and while working full time. And I'd hate to see young people like myself in the past have entry into this fishery, and maybe grow into a similar path. So I'm glad that he brought that up, something I didn't really consider. It's a little eye-opening. And to the gentleman's last point that he made, if you just got into it 2 years ago, sometimes the strategy and the technique that you need to learn over maybe a little longer than the 2 years that he's been at it on the commercial days, especially with the fleet working. It definitely it's a little different than non-commercial days. But the point I'd like to maybe make here on the record is, because of this meeting, and I think there was only 41 at the start, but maybe there's more out of that. 4,500 permits that are sold. 20% are actually out, catching the fish and selling to the market, I think it was. Are we going to have any sort of monitoring or analysis of the catch data and the individual permit holders that are selling to the market, next season, and maybe reference that back to, 2020, this season, I should say, in 2024, to see if there's any differentiation, if that 20% increase is to say 25, 30%, if other permit holders from, the seasons that this would, be based off of, if they're starting to become more active. Is that something that you're considering, or?
Dan,
Rick,
Story?
If this goes the way most other limited entry programs have been adopted, then the control date becomes the line in the sand on the calendar. And what happens after that date, January or next year, 2026, wouldn't qualify that holder for future participation. Like, the purpose of the control date is to prevent people from fishing harder now or in the near future in order to qualify. The control date, we didn't announce it till after the season was over, so nobody was able to fish extra hard in 25 trying to qualify. So it's not my intention to encourage more intense fishing in 2026.
Yeah.
I mean, the problems in this fishery are there's too many participants. The quota's used up quickly. We have a fairly low trip limit of 15 fish. And we don't even get into August, which is the month that price actually peaks. And there's complaints about an excessive, we just heard, some of that, on the open fishing days, that the fleet's pretty big. So reducing the size of this fleet is an objective, and we definitely do not want to encourage activities in 2026 that is going to enhance the chances to stay in the fishery.
Okay. And to that point, again, the control date is 2022 to 2025.
No.
It was up on the screen earlier.
The control date used to be 2022. We've slid it forward to 2025. So as we have our discussions over the next few months, everything prior to the end of 2025 could be considered.
All right.
It's not a window. It's a new date that you had to have fished prior to this new date. The new date is the 2025 season. That's where we cut it off, and now we look back.
Yep. Okay. And then we just don't know how far back you're going to look, if it's
right.
All right. But it could be similar to Tautog with 120 pounds, at least 120 pounds. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we want to I understand the objectives of maintaining opportunities for future participation. I totally get that. But at the same time, if someone's held a permit for ages and catches like between 0 and 1 fish a year, it's like, really? I don't think that's the case. That's not the scenario that we want to accommodate. Like, if people are continuing, as another comment said, continuing to buy this $165 boat permit and not even covering their costs, it begs questions like, why are they buying this permit?
Yeah, no, I completely understand, and I get the basis of moving forward on this initiative 100%. It might sound selfish. I mean, I'm sure to the rest of the group it sounds selfish, but with some lapse, right, over the past or more recent seasons, but leading up to then, I just would feel more comfortable understanding like what is going to be that time frame that you base like an average catch, and that's all. I'd hate to lose mine because I took the most recent 2 seasons. I focus more on chartering, to be honest. Back to that college guy there, Ryan's point, just kind of
we're
spend more
sensitive
time
to that.
doing something else.
We're sensitive to that, Rick, because a few years ago we used to allow the charter boats to land fish commercially, and then when we put an end to that, it forced these charter boat operators to do one or the other, and so it did create some tension there. And we know and we believe that sort of the charter captains or the charter boat owners are among the watermen, as somebody put it, or the blue economy. So that is something we need to take into account, because those are people whose livelihoods may depend on a portfolio that has some extra things in it, right? As things evolve. So we understand that. I mean, no one has said that tonight, but it's been stated to me in the past by members of the Charter Boat Association. So I just want to go on the record that we've heard that, and we'll see what we can do in that regard.
All right, Dan, I appreciate it, and that's all I have. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. Patrick Paquette.
Thank you, Jared. A follow-up question, and just I guess it's probably leading or something that went through my mind as I've heard other people commenting. Is there anything that prevents, as you guys develop the limited entry, which I'm in complete support of, that says that you only have to put a single criteria? In other words, if as you go through your analysis and you look at it and you consider all of the comments that you've gotten, and I know you've gotten a bunch, do you have the ability to say, okay, there's a short-term version of criteria if you've done this much over the past 2 years, but also you also would have criteria if you've done this much over the past 10? Like, do you have the ability, I'm not saying you will or won't, but do you have the ability to consider, and if you choose to say, okay, there's two different ways you can qualify if you fit under either one of these pictures?
I don't believe there's anything that would restrict us from doing that. Dan?
Yeah, and Patrick, we almost have to do that with the shore-based fishermen who have a daily limit that's different from a vessel-based fisherman. So we're going to need sort of different criteria for that class of permit holder.
Gotcha.
So,
No, I understand, and I like I said, I have faith in the analysis and the availability that you guys have to advocate it's within the community. And it was just one of those things that as I consider what I think of the people that would be victimized who are actual participants, because I mean I have taken enough grief in my life for not being anti-commercial and a conservation advocate, and because I believe that we have the best commercial fishery in the program on the coast, and our organization is older than this fishery when anybody could sell. And when this fishery was brought in, a lot of people worked really hard to keep it at rod and reel so that we kept it a somewhat part-time and we kept nets off them, etc. And I can see the different pictures and the different things that are required to make your money as a charter boat captain or a waterman with multiple things. And I could see it, you coming up with different scenarios, go, well, that's legitimate. I don't think it's only one window. I can imagine different scenarios that somebody should qualify in or should be considered. And as I don't have the access to ripping up the data the way you guys can, but I would just encourage you that don't just be limited by it's just a 2-year thing, or that may be different pictures, and maybe the qualification criteria could be an either or. Well, if you got this or if you get that, I would encourage you to think about how we have less victims and the people that are actually landing the fish, because the fisherman doesn't own the fish. They make their money off the right to provide fish to those who do not actually harvest themselves. And hopefully it's the people that have been serving the market are the people that are going to get the benefit of staying in this program in this fishery as it goes limited entry.
Thanks, Patrick. So I think just want to stress that the road this is going down is, if this rule becomes final, then kind of the people who get in the lifeboat are those who held a permit in 2024 or 2025. And then who gets to stay in that lifeboat would depend on the criteria that we establish over the next year. But I don't envision, unless we were to go to rulemaking and kind of shift course, is to create a new eligibility criteria where if you didn't hold a permit in 2024 or 2025, then you would us changing the rules so that if you had one in 23 or 22 or 20, where the first rule here is, in terms of the renewals, you had to have held one in the last 2 years. So from there, okay, from who's in or who's out after that group is sort of created. And so that's the direction I see this going in. But if you think we're going off course or going the wrong direction, then this would be a good opportunity to tell us and put it in writing. But that's how I see it going. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, and I think if we were to consider, I mean, we deal with that when we come to an entry-exit program on developing potential criteria for new entrants, certain thresholds for that based on exit, the amount of permits that leave the system. But yeah, I think that the permits moving forward would be the permits issued in 2026. Michael Durand?
Yeah, one more thing. Is there any considerations for charter captains? So if you maintain a charter because I went through all the effort to get my charter license, my captain's license. I have a charter. And like I said, my I know I'm kind of current sorrow, but I don't have any reports. But that's not the lack of trying or any ill intent on my part. But I was just thinking that might be a way to, if you're kind of trying to be as legitimate as possible, would there be any consideration for that? Where you have somebody who's definitely in the industry, definitely out there doing an effort to be on the water. Just a thought, just overall.
So, for 2026, the only consideration we're looking at is the presence and absence of a 2024 or 2025 striped bass permit. I can't, and I don't think anyone at DMF tonight can speak to what we're going to propose next as to how we get down
Right.
from 4,500 permit holders to some amount that we can administer a tagging program. That's what we're going to be analyzing this winter, working through our Marine Fisheries Commission to develop, and then going out to public hearing with, late spring, early summer to take feedback on. So I mean, point taken, looking at charter boat licenses is certainly something we can do. Just to kind of color this context a little bit, I mean, it really is going to come down to what number do we think we can effectively administer a tagging program at, and then how do we get to that number, in terms of, the qualifying criteria. And that's what the analyses are going to have to look at is what our options are to get to that number that we think we can administer. Right now we hand out, I believe, 125. We hand out tags to, I believe, 125 striped bass dealers. In the Tautog fishery, we have about 225 permit holders going through our New Bedford office to acquire tags. So I'm not saying the permit holder number needs to be that low, but it needs to be substantially lower than the 4,500 that we currently issue.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Yep. Rob Savino, you're up.
Hi, thanks for choosing me. I'm sorry I came in late to the meeting, so I did have just a couple of questions. If you guys have formulated a plan about the tagging at point of harvest yet, and in past meetings for a while now, I've been always pitching for tag at point of harvest. And in the past, I've always heard feedback that, well, we don't want to send tags out to every single commercial fishing permit. Before I go on, what have you guys thought about as far as how you would implement tags to commercial fishermen?
This was approved by the ASMFC about 5 weeks ago. We have till 2029 to adopt it. So we really haven't gotten to that point yet.
Oh, I gotcha. Because I know that part of my thought process is in the past was there's a concern about how many commercial striped bass licenses out there versus how many people are using them. And then there's also been a concern about sending tags out to every single commercial striped bass license and how do we manage tags. I foresee the tagging process to be very similar to what you have now. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier at the rec meeting earlier this fall, that the tagging process should probably still be distributed by the purchaser and the buyer, be it the wholesaler. Then this way, the state is not managing thousands of people with permits and tags, more than still the 125. And then each fisherman would go and get their tags.
Yeah. Hey, Rob.
Yeah, go ahead, Dick.
We're about a year premature on this, and also there isn't a single seafood dealer that I know that wants to take this on. So, I mean, I think your position is well known to us, and I look forward to getting your comments as we get closer to this. But we're at least a year away, and so tonight's hearing is just on those 4 main items about the permit itself. I understand it's the rationale for this has to do with, well, down in the long term, a tagging program for harvesters. But I would ask you to to just hold off getting the, getting into too much detail here because we're not really prepared to discuss it, but I would welcome you to put it in writing to us in our commission. So,
Well, the reason why I bring the tagging up is because if you get a really good tagging system set up, then you don't necessarily need to limit entry. Because I've been also arguing against limited entry. I kind of look at the situation of having 4,500 licenses out there and not everybody using them. And the possibility, and you've heard me mention this in the past, of people harvesting fish without necessarily reporting them and things of that nature because they have their commercial permit. Well, the tagging situation will solve a lot of that. So limiting entry to me almost seems like they're backwards.
Pump the brakes. I can't administer 5,000 permit holders with tags if at the end of the year I have to scratch back all the unused tags.
No, I'm not asking to give 5,000.
No, but that's the rule at ASMFC. When you issue tags, the tags have to be accounted for. And there's no scenario that I can envision where I would be able to spend the Division of Marine Fisheries resources on that big of a program. It's just unworkable. But again,
I understand.
Your comments are premature. I don't know if all the attendees really want to listen to an extended conversation about our tagging program because we're so far off. And all we're doing now through this proposal is limiting, we're hardly limiting. When we're going to be issuing about the same number of permits next year to people who have had permits in 24, 25. And then in addition, we're going to require owner operator, that you have to be present issue letters of authorization. Okay, so those are the rules for tonight. I really don't want to go into great detail speculating what we're going to do in the next steps because it's not fair because the public isn't expecting this tonight.
I understand. And the reason why I brought the tagging up, and I won't bring it up anymore, was because I think with a good program there, then you might not necessarily need to limit the entry and limit the licensing. That's kind of where I am because I am against it. I have a mate that has been working with me on my boat now for 3 years. He was 15 when he started. Now he's turning 18. His dad has had his commercial license on his boat. And by your rules now, next year, he was getting ready to start getting into the commercial fishery, and he is out. And those are the kind of things that I don't want to see happen. I don't want to see anybody being restricted into the fishery. And that's where I say one leads to the next, leads to the next. Well, how do you allow guys to get into the fishery? Well, you have to have guys that make a commitment and realize that they have to create a relationship with their buyer and things of that nature. And that's how your tagging program then helps with your licensing. So that's how I was going back to it. Now, as far as owner operator on it, I completely agree with that one because there are plenty of guys out there that are on boats and have multiple licenses and are fulfilling quota and the boat's not even in use and nobody's even there. So I support that. I do not support the limited entry and I don't want to go down that road. I would be glad to go down that road if it necessarily needs to be there, but I think more so what needs to happen is accountability of the fish that are being harvested. You've heard me say in the past that one of the big things that needs to happen in law is that if you catch a fish commercially, that fish definitely needs to be sold commercially and not for personal use. Unless you have an exemption where, yep, you can keep it for personal use as long as it is used towards the quota. But that's just some thoughts on it, and hopefully we can come back to the tagging. But as far as limited entry, I know several people right off the bat, and they've called me about it because they know I stay involved, and they say, "Does that mean I'm out?" And I said, "Yes, that does." So just some thoughts on that.
Yeah,
Thanks,
Rob. I would urge you to consider putting a lot of your thoughts in writing because you're obviously well versed in these issues.
Appreciate your time. Thanks, guys.
Mike Delzingo, how's it going, Mike? You gotta unmute yourself.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, Mike. How you doing?
All right, hi. I have a couple questions. Does in the new when the new permits are issued next year, how many of those are going to be first time issued permits versus renewals? And are you really going to be lowering the number of permits by simply adding a control date?
0 new permits will be issued next year. Only those permits that were held in 2024 or 2025 will be renewed. In terms of limiting access to a control date, adopting a control date itself does not limit entry. What the control date can do is serve as a threshold, a kind of date certain by which if you had certain amount of activity, you may be eligible to receive this moving forward. So
Yeah, I
starting in
understand. Maybe I asked
2026.
the question wrong.
Okay.
Of the permits that are issued each February, let's say, how many of those are first time issued permits?
About 500.
Okay, so that will supposedly eliminate 500 new permits each year. Have we thought about eliminating out of state permits, and what is the number of out of state permits that are renewed every year?
The Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution, we cannot discriminate based on residency.
Okay, well, my fear is that I'm a charter boat owner. I've been sort of forced into making the decision of taking the charters, which is guaranteed income, versus commercial fishing, which is not guaranteed income. So I've been sort of slowly forced out of this fishery with taking Sundays away. So my fear is that someone like me who uses this commercial fishery as another feather in my cap on a boat that makes money off of the water, that's going to be taken away from me and given to someone that lives in Rhode Island. Simply because, they have their hours on the water line up better with the Tuesday and Wednesday fishery than mine do, or if I'm taking charters that day.
Yeah, Mike, I hear your concerns and but we're not at that phase yet, but obviously you're prepared to speak to that. So if you want to be putting something in writing, not only about the 4 issues that we have tonight, but your thoughts going forward, we'd be glad to read them and engage with you on those issues.
Those are the types of things we're thinking about now as we work towards that next step of developing a potential threshold for the use of that control date and the things we need to consider. So,
okay.
And it's not germane to the 4 things being proposed tonight, but it's certainly something that can help us inform our next steps.
And I would also suggest under the owner operator use that some of these boats that are on the water specifically to make money off of the water, like charter boats, have hired crews, and you're eliminating people from the fishery who have a hired crew or have multiple boats with hired captains that fish on those boats. Like I'm lucky that most of the time it's my son who does it, but someone like Rob Savino, who doesn't have a son or a brother that would be fishing on the boat, maybe his mate wants to take the boat out that's been working for him for years, that would be eliminated from the fishery.
Okay. Appreciate the comment.
Thank you.
Rob?
Hey, thanks for taking my comment again one last time. I was wondering, and I'm just thinking in consideration of some of the scenarios like I'm dealing with, and I've been dealing with a couple of people where they're where their dad has the permit on their boat and he doesn't really actively fish with it, where the kid is now going to start taking on this boat. Have you guys considered potentially, because I know that I've heard guys trying to get their licensing and licensing data and catch data transferred from father to son, things of that nature. That would be another option that I could understand being effective, and something like that when you think about this limited entry. I'm just still not 100% on board with the limited entry achieving what we're looking for it to achieve, but
So,
I really
Rob, in that scenario in
getting squeezed
2026,
out.
under the existing rules, we could authorize a son to fish the father's permit without violating the owner operator, and to kind of skirt the owner operator rule. That's something we do consistently in the lobster fishery that has been owner operator for many years now. In
Okay.
terms of the other question as to whether permits can be transferred in family, again, that's the next step. That's something that we're, that's part of the things we're thinking about as we try to figure out how we get from, okay, now we've closed the door on new permits. How do we get to this tagging program? How do we address the accountability issues? And how do we do that through permitting moving forward? So I appreciate the comment, but it's kind of on that next step as to how we develop a transfer program or an exit entry program.
Are you thinking about doing that for the 2026 permit, or allowing, I guess my thought process is you can have a clause in there that says, father-son situation existing in 2026, father can renew the permit and the son can fish under his father's permit.
So that exists already. So that the so father can renew the permit for 2026. That 2026 permit can be fished by an immediate family member.
Okay.
And we authorize that through we issue an authorization to do that under all our owner operator permits. So what we are then developing next is going to be a exit entry program. And we want to move away from the traditional permit transfer program because of all of the issues we've heard over the years about how it turns things into an asset, how it makes and creates huge barriers to entry. And what we're looking to do, and I don't have any good intelligence as to what we're doing because it's really a brainstorming process at this point, is, trying to figure out how to address all these issues. How do we keep watermen in the fishery? How do we allow young people to access this fishery? And how do we achieve the goals of the limited entry program to address tagging, to address accountability? And how do we keep this permit from being expensive? How do we address familial transfers, stern men, all of those things? So, I mean, these are all the things we're thinking about right now.
Yeah, and I think what you're stating is exactly why I'm in the base of it, I'm against a limited entry because of people getting cut out. But if there's a way of people being able to get into a license and not make this license, let's just say it like a medallion, if you will, then then I'm all for that, as long as it allows people the opportunity to be able to get in. So let me just ask a quick question, because I know that people are going to be asking me about this. Then if father-son had a permit this past year and father renews the permit, the son can then fish under the father's permit in 2026?
Yes. With an authorization. They'd have to reach out to us and we give them a form letter. Each of them a form letter, and that's taken care of, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that.
No problem, Rob.
Sharon?
Yeah.
Wrap it up.
We got Mike Paulison.
Oh, Mike's coming back?
Mike's coming. Hey, lots of people get a second bite of the apple.
Come in. You hear me? I got to have another bite. That's right.
I can hear you, Mike.
Okay, good. I've listened to all the guys talking and all the concerns about the transfers and can I go? Can this guy go? Can somebody use my boat or not? If you do not establish this as limited entry, all those concerns are taken care of. The state of Massachusetts should be managing the fish and the quota. how it's caught, where it's caught, the size it's caught, and not deal with the people who catch it. If I wanted to go stripering, if I go stripering and all of a sudden I feel that I don't make it, I just go away. But that doesn't stop another guys thinking that, hey, maybe I can try this and I can do this. It's all about economics. The state shouldn't be pushing economics so that some guys can make a living and nobody else can go do it. That's not the way the state should operate. It should be working on the basis to take care of the striped bass fishery stocks, to do what it has to do to maintain it, to increase it, to do whatever, but not deal with the individual guy who actually puts the hook in the stripe. I think that's totally wrong. And I think you're coming up with more stuff that you can't enforce anyway, half of it. So just leave it alone and leave it the way it is. You know, I mean, simple is good, you know.
Simple is good. All right.
Right. So
thank you, Mike. We got one more, Dan. They're trickling in.
Okay.
We got Robert Moss.
Hey, good evening, Rob Moss, Chatham, Massachusetts, and I've been waiting for this for a long time. I was hoping to be implemented a long time ago, as is in every other fishery that I'm involved in. But I was really thinking about, you brought to my attention the new guy getting into this. I think when you start to eliminate some of these permits, you should give the new guy a shot at it who's never had one, maybe through lottery or whatever. I don't think they should be resold like the fluke permits and all that are going for $15,000, $20,000. I think that's absurd, but I'm so in favor of this. This used to be 50, 60% of my income every year. And, you know how that's dwindled. And I can tell you, when we're at the fish house in line, you'll see 4 or 5 guys that get their 15 fish every trip, and the rest are 1, 2. And there's so many of them, they're filling that quota. And I don't consider that a commercial fishery, I appreciate all you guys do. I certainly don't have all the answers, but I'm totally in favor of this. So thanks for letting me share.
Thanks, Rob. All right, Dan, that is the hands for this evening.
So the comment period remains open. I think, what's that date again? The
5 p.m. Friday, December 12th.
Very good. All right. And folks, we do welcome your written comments, because while this hearing will be posted on our YouTube channel, and some of our advisory commission members who weren't able to attend could listen in, the written word is always very effective. And so I really would welcome you to put your thoughts in writing as well. But thank you for attending. I'm sorry we didn't have an in-person meeting, but given the weather, I bet a lot of us are just as glad not to be battling the snow on the North Shore and the rain. So thank you, everyone. Have a great night. And again, we appreciate your comments and your thoughts on all these very difficult and complicated issues. But thank you so much.